Hello and welcome to Leadtail TV. I'm your host, Bryan, keynote speaker, coach of coaches, and author of H2H Human to Human. Today's guest is Christina Elwood, principal at Moreland Associates and interim marketing executive at multiple companies. In this episode, we talk about how her science and research background informed her later on as a marketing executive in those roles. What is the latest in AI and how will it help marketers utilize its best foot forward as we move forward as marketers? And finally, what does an interim marketing role look like? Along with some really effective strategies on how to hit the ground running. So let's get into it. Here's my interview with Christina Elwood. Christina, it is so wonderful to be here with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm really pleased to be with you too, Bryan. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, let's get started and roll right into it. I am super curious. I know everybody listening is super curious to just know a little bit about you. Why don't you give us just we're standing in an elevator. We have 30 floors. What would you say about yourself?
Oh, I would say that my passion is really helping to take ideas from a simple concept to a powerful reality. And one way I do that is in working with young technology companies to bring innovations to market and build traction in the marketplace. So those are really the things that drive me.
Getting traction in anything these days is definitely a challenge, no matter what role you're in. And so I'm super curious to dive in and learn more about that. And let's go back. Let's start back in the past. And I saw on your LinkedIn page that it showed that you worked for several years at Kevex Instruments as a manager. How did that go, and how did that inform your later career moves and value added and transformation and all the good stuff that came with it?
Yeah. Well, I'm a scientist by education, and Kevex is a scientific instrumentation company. And I had the privilege as an undergraduate of doing research under a professor who happened to buy a Kevex instrument while I was there. So I got trained in the instrument, and that led to the opportunity for me to work for the company. So we were in a wide range of markets, which was really helpful coming out of school to work with scientists in many industries and to help them to answer very important questions. I then was recruited into younger and younger companies until I realized that actually that's where I have the most value to bring, because you need an integrated approach, a multidisciplinary approach. You need to be able to think about things in a more complex context. And I love doing that. So taking innovations into new markets where they are not understood or known, and where the value proposition is not well established. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
So I'm super curious how you went from scientist to marketing, and how that right brain, left brain both helped you in the how did your scientist inform the marketer, and what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it was really through product management. So product management is a technical role where you're not actually doing the implementation of the technology, but you need to be able to understand the technology and the decisions that need to be taken for the use case in order to lead the effort on the product development. So product management then led to product marketing, and from product marketing moving really up the ladder into more senior level positions as more of a business person. So that was the path. I would recommend that path, because if you do not understand the issues at the technical level for a product-led company, especially a venture-funded product-led company, you really can't make good business decisions at the senior level. So I do recommend that as a background. I also have a little bit of a sales background, which we don't like to tell people, but the truth is having sales experience makes you a much better marketer. So when I'm recruiting marketers in, I'm looking for people who have foundationally a technical background, who have some product experience, preferably who have done some sales, and who think like a business person. Because to my mind, marketing is the center of the hub of a product-led company. On its right hand is sales. On its left hand is engineering and product. Above it is the corporate requirements, things like the website and PR. And below it is operational requirements. So marketing has a multidisciplinary role serving many groups within the organization. And if you do not think about the business first and foremost, and how that business is serving the buyer, you can't make good decisions about anything in marketing.
Yeah, that is for sure. And I love the way that you describe that with the marketing at the center. Would you also say that that would be the customer, that the customer is at the center, or that's informing marketing? Is that kind of what you're leaning towards?
In fact, and yes, in fact, I would actually take a moment to talk about another common question in the area of marketing for venture funded startups. And that's, how do you align sales and marketing? And really, it's through the buyer. If you focus on the buyer, you will always be able to align any of the groups in the company, but especially sales and marketing. So where they tend to get at cross purposes is where they're talking about the service that marketing is doing for sales and whether that's working for them. So are we really giving you quality leads, and whether sales is acting on those leads, and that interface right there. So all relationship problems, whether it's inside a company or outside of a company, happen at the interfaces. They do not happen in the flow. They happen at the interfaces of the flow, and that's true in this case as well. So if we focus on the buyer and say, what is the buyer's experience when they have raised their hand in some way that they're interested in engaging with the company and sales does not respond? What is that buyer's experience? Is that what we want them to have? And if it's not, then what are we going to do about that? What is the buyer's experience when they're really not ready to talk to sales and engage with sales, and they get a call from a salesperson? Is that the experience we want them to have? How can we improve both of those? And how can we measure what's working in a way that makes sense to both organizations? And actually, there's a newer model out that I have found extremely valuable. It's called the measurable lead model, and it was developed by Marco Savic at Funnel Cake up in KW in Kitchener-Waterloo, Canada. And it really simplifies the whole funnel representation and conversation. And it has a very key element to it that is not in any funnel that I've worked with, which is the notion of using nurture to recycle leads back into the top of the funnel and measuring those and the service level agreement and the velocity of those leads separately from the velocity of the first time through leads. I think those two components, the simplified model that allows sales and marketing to align very easily, and the notion of using nurture for recycling leads in a structured way, based basically on the reason they fell out of the funnel in the first place, whether that was in early stages or in the late stages, and nurturing them to overcome those obstacles. Those two improvements have really changed the way I see sales and marketing working together. And so I highly recommend anyone who's concerned about that issue that they look at that and consider adopting that model, at least for the point of conversation. You don't actually have to implement it, to use it as a point of conversation about where we could be doing better together.
So I love that. I've heard of funnel cake. So the idea then is to take your existing leads that are all warmed up and bring them back up to the top and put them through as if they're just coming through for the first time, rather than treating them like they're warm leads.
Yeah. So the ones at the very top of the funnel you would call warm, that fell out for one reason or another. But I would actually argue that leads that get all the way into the buying process and have reached the late stage, maybe even they decided to buy a competitor, that closed lost reason still needs to be nurtured, because they may regret the buying decision. It may not actually meet their needs, and you can bring them back into the top of the funnel to re-engage with them and sell to them. So no matter where they fall out, if they fall out at the top, very top of the funnel, at the first working stage with the salesperson, or they fall out at deeper sort of mid funnel, or they fall out at the end. In every case, you want to treat them as you've invested in. First of all, they invested. Very importantly, they invested their time and their effort to understand what it is that you do and how it applies to their business. You've invested as well. And for whatever reason, they didn't buy. Maybe the product didn't quite do what they needed at the time. It didn't integrate with their system or something, or they didn't have enough budget. They didn't realize it cost what it does, or they lost their champion, or whatever the reason is. You want to then nurture them against that reason to bring them back in. Now, I can tell you with the SaaS company I'm working with today, Procurify, when they have leads come back into the funnel, they have a much faster velocity through the funnel, and they have a much higher close rate. Not surprising, because buyer has been educated and you have been able to represent to them before. Now you are able to overcome whatever their limitation was at that time. So it's not a surprise, but it is surprising to me how few companies actually do that in a structured way.
Oh, that's great. I could talk to you about that all day long. It's one of my favorite topics, but I do want to make sure that we move this along, and I'm going to pivot just a little bit into artificial intelligence, which I know is something that is a common buzzword these days. But I'm curious where you think it fits in where AI fits and where it belongs, especially in automation and in different areas, and what you're studying and what you're doing with that, because it's coming, whether we like it or not.
It's coming
It is
for
coming.
sure. Well, true artificial intelligence is still a ways away. Really making decisions similar to the way a human would make a decision. But we have some pretty damn smart systems that are built on, combining multiple strategies and layers of artificial intelligence methods like machine learning. So it's in the automation world, it's essential to have systems that are capable of improving over time using their own data for automation. So whether you're automating a line, or you're automating a robot that is a part of a line, or you're automating, let's say semi-automating a process where a human is augmented by the technology, like a doctor doing remote surgery, for example. All of those systems need to learn from the data of what has gone before in order to improve them and in order to provide a more accurate or more precise outcome. In a more pedestrian area, when you instrument a physical environment, like put sensors into a physical space or into equipment so that you can monitor their health, you want to be able to get smarter and smarter about what tells you that this pump is going to fail, or that this compressor is going to fail, or this freezer is going to fail. And that requires a large body of data and then some analytics. The analytics techniques exist, but collecting the data is another story. We need more data that is standardized in order to really take advantage of the data. So how is the pump being used in this use case behaving differently than in a different use case with the same number of hours of data, right? So there's just a lot of decisions that we could be making that we're limited to by not having the contextual information about the data and not knowing which contextual information is most important. So there's a lot more work for us to do before we're really going to live in a truly automated world, but we can live in a smarter and smarter and smarter world. One of the companies that I advise is in the digital health space, and they use your own health data, your own blood pressure, glycemic measures and things like that, in order to help coach you to manage your chronic disease better. And that's another example of using data and analytics to improve outcomes, but it's not doing the thinking for you. It's providing you the information about what the data is telling you could improve your outcomes. And that data is substantiated, but it is not the same as a thinking robot. It's very different than.
I know a little bit about automation, obviously not into the AI realm personally, only because I tried to set up a automated system here in my house by putting all my smart light bulbs around my house, and then I tied it to my phone so that it was GPS geofenced, so that when I left my house, the lights would turn off, and then when I came home, the lights would turn on. The problem is that when I drove away to go to the store, my whole family was still home, and so they were out of lights, and so I got a call quickly from my wife. Come back! You need to
come back.
And
That's
I
right.
know this is like a small
override.
micro chasm of like what's of a user user error, but it feels like until like it's seamless, like it really, like automation really is well thought out, and like you said, using the data to understand his family's still at home.
Right. It's all about context, right? So what you did is, which is the most common way of automating anything, which is to use rules. If it's this time of day, do this. If I'm within the geofence, do that. So you set some rules. That's a starting point that is true for pretty much every automated system. Then what you want to do is use the contextual data next to say, well, if it's this time of day and I'm in the geofence, and then do this thing, right? So more, in fact, did you use IFT? Did you use IFTTT?
I know that I didn't use it for this, but I know what it is.
Yeah. So that's a good example of a system that lets you do that. So really what that is a set of rules where you bring the context to the party. You're the one who knows context. Then you move on to the system understands the context. So it learns the light, it's light outside or whatever. And then you move on from there to learning more and more complex things, not just the context, but multiple sets of contexts that can be used in harmony. And then you move into a decision mode where you're able to provide more complex decision making. And then you move into truly artificial intelligence mode, which I won't describe it accurately, but it's basically the concept that the machine is always learning what is, or is able to make decisions based on things beyond what it has learned. It's able to anticipate, if you will. So all of those layers are things that we are experiencing in our everyday life today. We all have things that happen on our phones, for example, that are somewhat contextual. Maybe your blue light filter comes on based on time of day, right? Or in your case, you used devices, IoT type devices, Internet of Things type devices to program them based on a set of rules. So that's kind of the state of where we are today at the consumer level. In the business to business world, it's a little more sophisticated. We've got some more implementations that are more sophisticated, but they're also more complex. Mm-hmm. So the number of things you have to get right is higher. So it's a fascinating area, and one that we are going to see more and more. This situation with COVID is putting manufacturers in a position of having to really rethink how they are using automation, where they are using automation, and what those rule sets really look like, and what can we learn from our data about how to automate better.
It's fascinating. I love it. I'm also curious because in recent years you've moved into more of a consulting and interim role or roles, and I'm curious what you found to be most effective in switching up strategy through back into the marketing realm, away from the AI realm, if you will, switching up strategies through marketing to boost more traction and business opportunities. I know that's an area that you're really focused on. We started out talking about traction. How is that something that you see changing, and how are you applying that?
Well, it's changed quite a bit since we've had the pandemic. That was a pretty abrupt change. How do you create traction in a market that is uncertain and unknown and depressed and evolving in a non-linear fashion? So let's just say the rules for engagement have changed considerably. But in general, when I drop into a interim role, there is some goal in front of the company that led them to feel they needed to have someone in that role. Either they've pivoted or they've realized that the challenge in front of them for scaling is not something that their current person has enough experience doing, or they are looking for an exit and they need to be able to establish some strategic partner relationships and feed those at the same time as growing in the market. They have some kind of strategic challenge in front of them that they feel they need a particular combination of skills to go after. So oftentimes I'm coming into a situation where the technology is new to me, but the challenge that they have in the business challenge they have is familiar. So the first thing that I tend to do is just, to get my legs under me, is to understand what's working and not working today. And then looking at the team, who has the skills that we need to deploy to improve what outcomes we're trying to gain, and adding whatever tools or support that they need in order to be able to do that, or bringing in talent from the outside. So those are sort of common. Those are things that you do even when you get hired into a role. That's not that different. But there's a big component of strategy and education of the team itself. To talk about, here's what I see, is certainly something that anyone coming into an organization would do. But to say, here are the things that will be necessary to have the outcome you're looking for. That is not always something that the team feels confident that they know and understand. And here's what I have seen in other situations that we might anticipate could be a challenge for us. Again, not something they may have ever experienced before, so they don't necessarily know what to anticipate there. And then finally, what is the order of operations? What is the highest impact thing that we can do first, and then second, and then third, as a team, as a coordinated team? They tend to think that when you come in this marketing role, that you're going to do things in marketing only. But of course, marketing is integrated across the company, as we discussed earlier. So it's necessary to prioritize that work across the organization and not just from the lens of demand gen or the lens of awareness. So does that give you sort of a sense of how it's a little different than being hired in to an organization?
Oh my gosh, yes. And what I love about that is that you're really leaning into that. It's not just, well, you're leaning into the integrated approach, and what's landing for me is that there's a lot of leadership values coming into place here in terms of how you put things in place, that structure and impact, so people can see how they make an impact across the organization rather than just in a department. And so have you seen, so is that something that you're instilling, or even assessing, is how is leadership now, and how does leadership need to be as part of that marketing role and a part of the interim role, and how you can make an impact on the organization?
Yeah, I think every leader coming into an organization has an impact on how the leadership of the organization operates, and what the overall capacity is for the organization to align behind a goal. So someone who comes in who's very collaborative and alignment oriented, who zeroes in on that business challenge, tends to pull people towards them. And someone who is trying to set a new goal, because maybe that's where the challenge is that you need to set a new horizon, then collaborating around what does that new horizon look like, and what do we have to do to change to get there, is a different challenge, but often one that is led by whoever is the newest leader in the team. It isn't always marketing, but marketing is always a change agent in every organization. The first thing that has to change when there is a change in the business is marketing. So in the downturn, we needed to decide, how are we going to continue to get leads into the business, for example? Where is the demand now? How do we communicate with the buyers? How do we, in this case, how do we show compassion and empathy? How do we understand what their needs are today that are different than what they were yesterday? And how do we address those needs? That's all done in marketing. If you just raised funding, for example, that's another time when I might be brought in as an interim because they just raised funding. Okay, so now we need to scale. What exactly does that mean? We need to scale. And what are all the areas that we need to scale? And one of the first things we need to do is change how we are talking about our product in the marketplace, because we've been selling maybe to a segment. Maybe we now have a beachhead, but we need to expand beyond that. So that's a marketing change. So no matter what change, even a downsizing, no matter what change you go through as an organization, marketing's on the front lines of not only implementing that change, but leading the change in the organization. So in that sense, marketing is like the right hand of the CEO in helping to bring change about in the organization. And so it is a role where it's important that there be a high level of trust and a high level of respect across the leadership team. And where you see difficulty in organizations moving smoothly forward is when they do not have good alignment and trust across the leadership team. And marketing is often the first one to detect that in its sort of pure form, because it sits in the middle, right? So it's affected by any tension in the leadership organization. So.
Wow, I want to hug you right now. You're so speaking.
I would like you to hug me right now, to be honest with you. The hugs are a little short supply these days.
I do miss hugs.
Yes, I do too.
You're so speaking my language. I love hearing this. As a leadership and marketing guy, I couldn't agree more that when it comes together and when it aligns with trust, across the organization, there's just, and then again, back to the customer, it really,
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
it's so it's so well put. I love how you just described all that. Let's end with this. I'd love to just kind of take a little peek into where we are now. Without a doubt, one of the phrases most associated with you and your endorsements is focused. And in today's increasingly remote work environment that we're all going through, given the global pandemic, how do you find the best way to stay focused and align efforts as a leader? And even in the interim roles you're taking on, what are you seeing there?
So focus is a mental discipline. So you choose what you focus on. And this is true of all humans. We all choose what we focus on, and what we focus on tends to be what our brain works on, where it applies creative or analytical power. So focus in many ways is everything. And with a team, where the leader focuses is where the team will focus. Sometimes directly and sometimes indirectly. So directly, if you are focused on, for example, the metrics or the speed of delivery or something like that, well, then everybody in your team will be focused on that too. But indirectly, if you're focused on whether or not the team is working well together, they'll pick up that too. And that will be part of the unconscious or subconscious focus of the team. They'll start thinking about whether they are collaborating as well as they could possibly be collaborating. So what you focus on determines what you accomplish. It determines what your organization is aligned to, and it determines ultimately what outcomes are possible. So for me, focus is really important.
And I picked up on one word you said earlier that I believe fits in as well into all that, and that's empathy. Given what's going on in the world right now, empathy for our customers, empathy for the employees, empathy across the board couldn't be more needed than now. So
I agree with that. And when people are working together, in business, the fundamental currency of business is trust. In a collaborating team, you have to couple that trust with compassion and empathy. If you do not care about each other, if you do not care about the group you're serving, in this case, the buyers, or perhaps you're also serving an internal organization like sales, if you're doing some sales enablement work, if you do not have compassion and empathy for them and for each other, collaboration is really more about shared tasks and not about collaborating at all. So to have collaboration, you have to have compassion and empathy. It creates an environment where people can be creative and where they can take risks and they can be innovative. And those things are very important to amplifying the outcomes that we're looking for, that you don't just get the job done, but you contribute more than just getting the job done.
I can't think of a better way to end this. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your insights and knowledge, and both your left side of your brain and your right side of your brain with us. This has been incredible. Is there anything that you want to leave off with?
I just want to say thank you to you for the interview and the opportunity to talk with you. I admire your work, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to have this conversation. So thank you for that, and be well, be safe, and keep up the good fight.
Oh, you got it. And us at Leadtail really enjoy and appreciate your work as well. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.